respond appropriately to the environment. And I'm not oversimplifying because I think that this is a simple concept. I'm oversimplifying because I like things to make sense. And when I'm trying to make sense of zealotry, I think it just points back to we've all just gone so fast, and we've tried to consume so much and do so many things and be all things and be on all platforms at all times that we've lost the ability to be patient and know our place in the great cosmos, to embrace mystery, find peace, and align expectations with reality. And I don't know how to get back to that other than to invite people to return to intentionality. You know, it's one of Christian's favorite words. It's my favorite word in counseling. And I think to bring it all back home and kind of put a bow on this conversation, because I really enjoyed talking, but I'm also mindful of time and I want to respect yours. Your blog, thisisnotyourpracticelife.com, by the way, it speaks to being purposeful with one's own choices. You want to be mindful and consider lots of different angles, but it's a thought-provoking exercise on how a person who's reading that can make next steps in their life with intent, not just unconsciously, mindlessly reacting to the environment out of emotion or whatever else, or belief, And so I guess my invitation to the audience is to check out Donald's blog. Obviously, it's really good, but also to consider all this stuff that we've discussed and how it might apply to your life. Like, are you finding yourself just fumbling through, reacting and not responding? Are you clinging to beliefs that maybe don't serve you anymore? And then what do you want to do about that? And what is your contribution going to be to the world? I love that you're leaving a legacy with this writing and the impact you've made on your students and stuff. I would love to have taken a class from you. And maybe if you're bored, you can just jump on YouTube and start making seminars and put them out there. But it's been really fun. I want to wrap up by asking you, if you had a class to teach or a topic to share, what do you think you would go back into if you could or wanted to?
Oh, Jake, that would be very difficult for me to narrow it down. Honestly, because in my my first textbook I wrote,
first textbook. Geez, I haven't written anything. You've got them in order.
Well, anyway, I actually listened to a colleague of mine who said, "Well, why not make it holistic?" And I thought, he's got a good point there. I think what we need to do is, I try to see analogs in almost everything. I think probably what drives me in my writing, and I look for things. And I don't want to belabor your time or your effort here, but yesterday I wrote a poem for a blog, and basically I was just looking through a book of poetry, and I stumbled across Keats's poem, Ode to a Nightingale. And one of the things Keats says in that poem is that the song he hears the nightingale sing was the same song that the ancient kings heard. But the reality is, there have been studies that show that when birds come back to a meadow spring after spring after spring, there's a slight alteration in the song. You need an oscilloscope to find it. Or you need to be an ornithologist with an ear for birds, but there is a slight change. And I think about, and what I do is draw the analogy in our society. What we don't realize is that we might think that the song of our society that we sing now is the song that we were singing decades ago. But there have been those subtle changes, a note here, a note there, and they add up. And what it is yes, not necessarily the human brain is changing, although it's malleable, but the society changes note by note from generation to generation, which makes it so difficult for somebody now to sing the same song that somebody sang back in the 1940s, for example, meaning not the song, but the culture, understanding the culture, knowing what's going on, communicating the same way. We know we're not going to communicate the same way in this generation that the last did, or 5 generations from now. And the same thing goes with your DSM that you people rely on. And that is, another blog I wrote recently about Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. Burton lived in the 17th century. He wrote of the ailment at that time, which was known as melancholy. Well, today we might call it manic depressive, or we might call it depression, melancholy. But he has a giant, thick book on melancholy, and anybody in his time would have understood the malady. If you said to them, well, this is a manic depressive, or if you said something else, then you would not be able to communicate with them because they couldn't understand the metaphor. Right. And what we have to watch in some way is, are we actually getting new understanding of human psyche, or are we just throwing in neologisms? Are we twisting it just a little bit so that we could say, look, this is how we see it, putting in a new metaphor without actually advancing our understanding? I'm sorry for running on that, but
it's good. I'm not short on time whatsoever. I was just trying to respect yours. I could talk about this stuff all day.
I'm retired, remember.
That's true. Well, maybe we don't have to wrap up then. I wrestle with that because one of my many frustrations with my professional field is that I think people do repackage things, and I don't know that we're doing a follow-up analysis. I had a conversation recently with somebody about policies, because we tend to, hurry and throw together policies to say that we did something, and then there's no policy analysis to follow up.
There's no assumptions.
And so we'll take something, and it's going to sound unfair if you're listening and you know what I'm talking about. I'll take something like dialectical behavior therapy, which is an amalgamation of other theoretical modalities, and we know it works. But did it advance anything? I don't know. And there's a lot of them out there that we know they work. ACT works. There's it's acceptance and commitment therapy. EMDR is a new modality that people are using, where it involves moving and tapping and integrating the body's senses while connecting with the brain and trying to reprogram stuff. But now recently I've heard about something that's basically EMDR light, and it does the same thing, but without having to go through the full-blown program. And I don't want to chalk this up to nefariousness or capitalism. I don't think that's it. I think people are honestly trying to pursue new, innovative ways to get things done the way that they are comfortable, and that's fine. But when you compare that against the backdrop of the explosion of mental illness and people seeking care and provider deficiencies, I don't know that we've necessarily advanced the cause if we're not healing the world.
That problem to deal with. I would wonder if 18th century woman from melancholy came to your office and said, I need help. Would she comprehend the nature of your help? Or could you go to the 18th, for example, and say, I have to deal with these people who are suffering from melancholy?
Well, I think that, I would like to think that I'm a little unique because I have studied a lot of the originators of the field. I've read a lot of Jung and Freud, and I would like to think that I do well enough seeing through. This is going to sound awful to those who really are interested in cultural competence training and diversity, inclusion, equity, and stuff. But I see through the culture, I see through the outward behaviors, and I try to meet the inner soul of the human being I'm talking to, regardless of who they are, where they are, what they look like, what they do for a living, where they were raised. And I get curious and humble about their story. I'm not interested in projecting my own stuff on what I think they are. So I think for me, I would probably do okay. Now that's probably just an arrogant overstatement of my own abilities. But to your point, I don't know that students graduating from grad programs today have that ability because they've been pumped, and I know this because we interview them all the time for grad student positions and new therapist positions. They've been pumped so full of CBT and thinking errors and the modern evidence-based practices that are supposed to be very brief in their duration and solution-focused, that I don't know that people have practiced sitting with another human being and being curious. I think our profession has moved more toward, I'm gonna give you some stuff, you're gonna go home and take the homework and fill it out and you'll get fixed somehow. So I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I can't speak to it since I'm not in your profession that much. I'm just on the outside.
It's a good thought exercise, though, and I
like to. If you said, "Well, what would I teach?" As long as I'm challenging students, it didn't matter what subject. I don't care if we were, if I was teaching a literature class or a writing class or a carbonate sedimentology class. It wouldn't matter. Just challenge the people. Well, I mean, every time you accept the challenge and you meet it, you've gained something.
You may or may not know that you had a profound impact on many students because Christian takes a lot of what you've used in your own career path and used them in the university setting. One of which was, I'm only going to be on one planet the rest of my life. I might as well know as much about it as possible. He adapted that into, I'm only going to have one mind the rest of my life. I might as well know as much about it as possible. And I think that's really cool. But one thing that's really stuck with me that he attributes to you is, I asked him one day, way back when we first met, 2007 or something, and I said, how is it possible that you have all these books and authors and references and instant recall at the top of your head when you're teaching? He says, my dad taught me that if you really want to learn something, read it as though you have to teach it to somebody else. And I'll tell you what, Don, that shifted everything for me. I listen to podcasts now as though I have to teach them to somebody else. I read, obviously. I pay attention in conversations as though I have to relay it. And man, the information really sticks. I'm wondering if you have some other little gems that you would like to leave people.
I'll just speak to that for a second, and that is this. When I was a young teacher, and in Pennsylvania, you had to go through student teaching your senior year. And I had been on, of course, the student side of the desk, the teacher's desk, for all my life. And all of a sudden, I had to be on the other side of the desk. And I realized knowledge isn't something that I'm supposed to struggle with. It's something I'm supposed to convey. And by studying it so that you can teach it, means you can organize it. You can take what so many students is in fact chaos, and you make it into order for them. You're presenting it for them, and you want them to see an order that they can't see from their side of the desk. So yes, I always say, if you want to learn something, I always contradicted students who said, well, I understand it, but I can't explain it. No, if you cannot explain it, you do not understand it.
Yeah.
Okay. The only thing that applies to essentially is love.
Well, I don't know if we can even do either of that.
You never want to have the woman or man in your life saying, well, why do you love me? That explanation is going nowhere.
You put your finger to your lips and go. So what other pithy insights might you want to share from your years of experience?
Maybe I spent them all in my morning blog writing. I'm not quite sure that I can come up with anything on the spot that would be of.
That's fair. I kind of trapped you with it. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end then.
Okay. Well, I enjoyed talking to you.
I loved it, and I think that smart people who've done some work over the course of their lives, which is pretty much anybody, I think, deserves to have it shared, because I think wisdom is universal, and the more we can absorb, regardless of the source, the better off we are. And I started doing this podcast almost 4 years ago now, which is crazy to me. And the whole goal in my mind was just to push information out, and I say it repeatedly, this doesn't do any good locked up in my head. I want people to take it and use it so